Okay, so we are going to work through the chapters 1 and 2 Excel labs. And what you're going to want to do is open up the mtcars file on Schoology. And this represents the motor trend car roads test. So the data was extracted from the 1974 Motor Trend US magazine and comprises fuel consumption and 10 aspects of automobile design and performance for 32 automobiles. This is from 1973 and 1974. So we have all of these different variables. Let me zoom in just a little bit. We've got all of these different variables and the description for what each variable is. So MPG stands for miles per gallon. AM stands for transmission. So if it's equal to 0, that means we have an automatic car. If it's equal to 1, we have a manual car. So let's just take a look at our data. So this is what we have. So we have all these different car models. And then for each of these cars, we have the miles per gallon. And for example, we have AM transmission. So 0 was automatic, 1 was manual. Okay, so this is chapter 2. So the goal of this chapter is to summarize data. So we want to create charts, tables, plots, things of that nature, so that we can summarize data. Because ultimately, data can be very large. This set isn't very big. This one's only, let's see, it would be 32 values. But some data sets can be massive, and so we're going to need to summarize these data sets into convenient charts and tables so that we can kind of draw conclusions and get an idea as to what the data represents before we're doing any formal statistical testing. So to do this, we're going to answer some questions. So I've got this tab with the questions. And my first question is, what proportion of the vehicles are manual transmission? Create a summary table, a pie chart, and a donut chart of the transmission of the vehicles. So like I said, you just want to work your way through this video, do everything that I'm doing so that we can build some Excel skills. And I think we'll learn a lot more if you're working through this actively with me. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit from down here in this bottom corner. So the first thing I want to do, so let's just highlight this first row. If you just click on the number 1 here, and we go over to the top right, and we go to filter. So notice that filter now allows us to filter to different things. So let's say I want only automatic transmissions. Well, remember automatic is labeled as a 0, so I'm going to deselect 1, and so now I'm only left with zeros here. Or let's say I want only manual, so I'm going to select 1, and now I'm left with all of the manual vehicles. So that's our little helpful filter function. Okay, but what did we want to say? So what proportion of the vehicles are manual transmission? Okay, well this whole AM10 thing is kind of confusing. So how about we make a new column? So let's go ahead and just click on column K, and then let's right click and say insert. So I have a new column right next to AM. So let's call this column transmission. So I just want to convert 1s and 0s into automatic and manual. So recall that a 0 represents automatic. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use an if statement. So we're going to say equals if, open parenthesis. So if this value is equal to 0, then we want it to say automatic. Otherwise, we want it to say manual. Okay, notice I got an error. So if you come up here, you can see the formula that I wrote. So the thing is that we wanted this to be a character. So I needed to wrap this in quotes. So I wanted to say automatic, or I want it to say manual. And now if I hit enter, it should work. Okay, yes, 1 is manual. So this if statement is just saying, if that value is equal to 0, then we want it to say automatic. Otherwise, we want it to say manual. Okay, so now I can either just take my cursor over this bottom right box and drag down, or I can just double click on it and it'll go all the way down for me automatically. So notice that everywhere this is a 1, it says manual, and everywhere it says 0, it says automatic. Okay, so now we have a little bit more of a helpful column here for transmission. Okay, but we want to know the proportion of this data set that are either manual or automatic. So we're going to create something called a pivot table. So let's go ahead and let's just select this entire data set. So go ahead and highlight this whole data set. Come up here to the Insert tab, Insert, Pivot Table. And then we can just hit OK. And notice that it created a new tab down here. I'm going to move it to the right. And I'm going to double click on sheet 1 so I can rename it just 1 because this is question 1. Okay. So pivot tables are really powerful because we can do all sorts of summaries very quickly. So we were interested in transmission. So if I put transmission here in the rows, it creates row labels for automatic and manual. But if I put transmission in the columns, well then it would be column labels instead. And values, this is just going to count how many are in that column. So what we want to do is get a count and percent of transmission. So I'm going to put transmission here in the rows. And now I'm going to take transmission again, and I'm going to put it in the values. And notice that it says count of transmission. So we have 19 automatics and we have 13 manuals with a total of 32. Okay, now go ahead and take transmission again and drag it down into values again. Okay, but now we want a percent. So let's go ahead and right click on this number 19. We really are just focused on this column. So let's right click on this cell. Summarize values by. Now we don't want it to be a count. We want a percent. So we actually go to, you want to go down to show values as. So we want to say show values as percent of grand total. Okay, so now this is our summary table. Sorry, I should explain that. So I'm going to give this table a title. So I'm going to select these 3 cells at the top. I'm going to say merge and center. And then I'm just going to start typing summary table of transmission. I'm going to click on that cell. I might make it bold. Maybe I'll increase the font using this button up here, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, and this is our summary table. So we have the counts of each type, and then we have the percents of each type. So this label is actually wrong. We'd want to say percent, and then this would just be count. Okay, so what were we asked? What proportion of the vehicles are manual transmission? Okay, well, what proportion are manual? So 40.63. So I'm just going to round this to 41. So our answer here is 41%. Okay, now we want to create a pie chart and a donut chart. So let's go ahead and do that. So I am going to select so we want to go back to our data. So let's go ahead and highlight this column. So I'm highlighting the column of transmission. I'm going to insert. So now we want to insert a pie chart. So notice that this has got a little pie. So I'm going to click on the pie button, and I just want a 2D pie. Okay, that did not work. There we go. Okay. Sorry, false start there. So let me get rid of this. So we have our summary table, but we just want to convert this count into a pie chart. So let's go ahead and just select our two numbers, 19 and 13. So we have our count. So now we want to go to Insert, Pie, 2D Pie, and we have our pie chart. So we can see that most of these, I'm going to click on this and make the font a little bit bigger. We can see that the blue represents automatic and the orange represents manual. So there are clearly more automatics than manuals in this data set. Now I'm going to click on the title. So count isn't super helpful. Let's just say pie chart of transmission. There we go. But let's say we actually want to see the values in this chart. So if I just right click on something, I can just say add data labels. So if I right click on our actual plot, right click, add data label. And they're kind of hard to see. I don't know why the default is to make them so small. So if I just kind of make this bigger and put that there, I might increase the font. And then same thing. Now I'm going to click on the orange, say add data label. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not popping up. Okay, you'll learn that Microsoft Office products can be a little fickle to work with. So I'm just gonna make this font a little bit bigger, and then I can move this back in. Okay, so we have our pie chart. So notice that we gave it a title, so we always want to give a chart a title. And then we have our legend, so we know that what each color represents. And then we have our data labels so that we can specifically see how many belong to each group. Now notice we could have done the same thing with the percents. So if I select the percents and say insert, pie chart, 2D, and then we say add data labels. Okay. So if I just summarize this by percent of grand total, okay. Let me just get rid of this. Okay, so we have our pie chart. Now the pie chart is only based off of this first column, not the second. So if I just convert this into a count, so if I just say no calculation, we'll get the actual counts. But if I wanted to convert it to a percent summarize value as percent of grand total, and it converts to a percent. So maybe we prefer that, and so I'll make this column just a count. So I'm switching this around a little bit. So we've got percent. Okay, well, never mind. Okay, so let's just go back to our questions. So we created a summary table, then we just created a pie chart. Now we want to create a donut chart. So this process will be very similar. So we're going to highlight our data, and then I'm going to go to Insert. So now instead of picking 2D, we're going to pick a donut. And it's essentially the exact same plot. It's just it's now shaped as a donut instead of a pie. And if we wanted to give this a title, we could go to Design. So if you go to you have to click on the chart, go to Design tab, and then go to Add Chart Element, Chart Title, say Above Chart. We will say donut chart of transmission. Now let me actually, okay. So let's go ahead. Okay, sorry, I'm a little all over the place here. So, right, notice that I only have transmission once here in the values. And I went to summarize values by, or show values as % of grand total. But we also wanted our summary table. So copy. I'm going to paste this so that I can add account. Okay, so here our summary table is really down here. Okay, so we've got our pie chart, we have our donut chart, and then we have our summary table here. And we answered our question, what proportion of the vehicles? It's 41%.